Hello, folks, and welcome back to Terraria. I'm a little sick while recording, so hopefully that doesn't affect the audio too terribly, but I wanted to get a video out this week, so I'll have to make do. Last time around, I explored the surface, used explosives to dig out a tunnel straight to hell, and built a home for the guide in the starting forest. Busy, busy, busy. And there's a lot more where that came from. Lots of building projects that I'm doing today, so without further ado, Day 11 begins, and I freeze time to begin working on a house for the merchant, counting out 25 blocks away from the build I made in the previous session to account for any crowding penalties. I want to establish a precedent with NPCs. First, I'll make a build for each of them that's thematic and tries to accommodate their happiness. The second is that I won't purchase anything from them until they have a house. I tried a new method for this build by laying out the shape first with one material, in this case dirt, based on a few references I found of similar designs. However, all the wagons I found online shared a roof that sloped upward, so I decided to invert it, almost like the roof is sagging inward from holding up its own weight. I like the idea that this town is developing naturally, so first the guide moved into an old house and fixed it up new, and now the merchant is coming in on his wagon to supply the newly developing community. The first thing I did was build the wheels of this wagon using grates, before building some supports and establishing the floor. I used a combination of shadewood, ebonwood, and boreal wood for this build because I wanted to highlight the mix of purple and deep brown tones. Halloween has just passed by the time this video comes out, but while recording I was still in the spirit. I also thought these colors would highlight this build as a sort of traveling fortune teller's cart. I struggled a bit with the roof before using gray bricks for the time being. I also added some small spirals to each end of the roof, and the walls were a combination of boreal wood, some craggy stone, and other such blocks. I threw up stars and bottles and banners to light the room and give it a more mystical nature, and the rest was just a matter of decorating, including a cooking pot as a witch's cauldron, and seashells to establish the owner of the cart as someone well-traveled. With that, the build is basically done. I came back in the end to replace the gray bricks with mud bricks because I thought they matched better. I also planted some pumpkins and used a living leaf wall to make some bushes for a small bench seating area behind the cart. And the style of this build perfectly segues into Day 12. I opened the herb bags I researched last session to collect many of the different potion ingredients you need in Terraria. I spent the rest of the day in the desert creating obsidian and crispy honey blocks before returning home and creating a multitude of potions which make me faster, stronger, more durable, etc., etc., etc. Very cool and good. In the evening, I tested my newfound power by increasing the mob spawn rate and chugging a battle potion. My foes didn't know who they were messing with. Their cries echoed out across the night as a warning against all who would dare to oppose me. Also, if you're curious what those cries sounded like, here's a sample. Day 13 dawns, and I used the lenses I farmed the previous evening to make archery potions, which I highlight because in combination with my armor it makes my bow even more powerful. At the end of last session, the Eye of Cthulhu attacked me unprompted, but I also had to deal with a slime rain and the subsequent slime king it summoned. This means that I already have 2 treasure bags for the first 2 bosses of Terraria. Not bad, but not good enough. With Journey Mode, I can research these bags if I collect 3 of them in total, so before opening either of these, I decided to do just that. So I traveled to the Crimson biome beside the dungeon and set about making an arena to face these and some future bosses. I bombed out the terrain and shaped the Crimson into a series of violent tentacles or spikes before scaffolding a bridge with stone slab and gray bricks. I used a combination of iron and lead fences to highlight what was in light or shadow before closing the support with some stone platforms. I placed lava at the bottom of the moat, though later replaced it with honey I collected last session in the jungle. And that honey, for those who don't know, gives a passive regen effect for a few seconds when stood in, and though its location in this build is inconvenient for most fights, it's useful at times. I used shadewood platforms to accentuate the pillars and add a design in the supports, which I changed the shape of to an arch, opposed to the flat line it was previously. I continued the bridge up toward the higher level with more supports and began building out a series of stone slabs to mimic some of the original design of the dungeon beside it. I want this arena to look like a ruined coliseum or fortress that people have begun to explore. To that end, I broke up some of the stone slabs with a hammer and added rope bridges with a combination of wood platforms and fences. Some banners, heart lanterns, and a campfire and a bass statue meant that this arena was ready for its first fight. I'm not done with this build, and not by a long shot, though I intend to return it, just not at this point. I was eager to finish this stage of progression. I was able to defeat both the Slime King and Eye of Cthulhu again, researching their treasure bags and claiming the rewards, namely a menacing shield of Cthulhu, a slime mount, and Crimtane bars. I used this new metal to make a fishing rod and to improve my bow. Day 14, I'm back to building. This time I need a dock to make use of my newly minted fishing rod. I used palm wood to build supports connecting to the sea floor, wood for its horizontal planks, and boreal wood to look like a strong base that has been soaked with water. I used palm wood platforms underneath the boreal wood for extra detail, and hammered them to create spots of green like algae growing underneath the dock. I finished it up with some tiki torches, fences, and other small decorations, and I was quite proud to figure out that I could put palm fences on top of normal fences to make them have an overgrown detail. With that, I spent the rest of the day fishing for crates, until a blood moon hit, and I continued trying to fish in spite of the enemies that now were attempting to surround me at all times, only to awaken something horrible in the depths. Fortunately, I was able to defeat the creature, and I discovered a new thing for me to seek after in research, the chum bucket, which I believe increases my fishing power. However, the blood moon ended before I was able to obtain enough to research them. Ah well, something for me to look forward to in future. I spent the following day fishing as well, and was similarly interrupted by a slime rain. Fortunately, I was able to defeat it and the Slime King, again, before researching the wooden crates and immediately putting them to use on my dock. There are only a few more things I need from fishing right now. The first two I can only get in the Crimson, so I traveled there to continue reeling in the rewards I was casting my hopes on. Get it? Reeling? Casting? No, just me. Maybe my dad. Whatever. Of course, terrible demons spawn in the Crimson, but I handled that appropriately, and was able to research the Crimson Tigerfish and the Hemopiranha. Finally, I traveled to the caverns below the desert to fish for the armored cavefish. Using these three fish and the herbs I already gathered on day 13, I was able to make the final 3 potions I wanted at this stage. The most important, at least in my view, being the Potion of Endurance, which gives a 10% reduction to all damage taken. Not bad. Day 16, I set up an arena to face the so-called Torch God event, which involved hollowing out a small chasm and placing a grid of about 100 torches, which combined with the rest of them in my desert cavern, reached the threshold to begin the event. With the help of my new potions and some placeable buffs to regen and defense, I was able to survive the encounter with little trouble. The boon of the Torch God allows you to place torches of the appropriate type for whichever biome you currently find yourself in, which grants a small bonus to luck and is thematically appropriate as well. I spent the rest of the day replacing the torches in the desert and snow biome before stumbling across a compass. Discovering the compass reminded me of something I read on the Terraria wiki, that the original guide's name in your world could tell you the position of the Aether biome, something I searched for on day 8 without much luck. With my newfound knowledge, I returned to the jungle on day 17, and selected an appropriate height from which to build my new tunnel. I want to build a railway across the map to link each new settlement I build, so I can use this as the start of that. I plotted 150 blocks on either side of the 8,000 coordinate before bombing downward with scarab bombs and fortunately arriving just beside the Lake of Shimmer, which will be very useful for the future. Day 18, I traveled to the Crimson biome, on the same side as the jungle, to construct another arena in much the same style as the one I'd built beside the dungeon. I used a combination of shade wood and gray bricks to lay out evenly spaced pillars to support the platform, placing heart lanterns, honey, and shadewood campfires below these. I blew up one Crimson Heart to get the Undertaker, before summoning the Brain of Cthulhu manually, with a bloody spine. I dealt with the first phase easily enough, though I discovered my bow wasn't the best at handling the group of summons, so I switched to my enchanted sword for a while until I got closer to triggering the second phase. Things felt really scary towards the end as I struggled to figure out which version was the real one, but thankfully I just about survived, so next time I'll become better equipped to handle it, I'm sure. With that, we've come to the end of the second session of Terraria. I did a lot of building this time around, and I'm hoping to maintain that momentum as I continue with this series. We've got a home for both the guide and the merchant now. Next time, I'm heading to the desert to set up camp for a few more, including the arms dealer, who can move in now thanks to my new handgun. Once again, thank you to the Terraria community for tons of great inspiration for this series. And thank you for taking the time to watch. I really appreciated all the great support on the first episode. Anywho, I'm done here.